One thing I've noticed about Jeffrey Epstein's arrest is that it created, at least initially, a rare moment of relative trans-ideological unity. Now, partially that's because Epstein's been linked to prominent Democrats and Republicans, and partisans of all stripes are hoping he brings down someone on the other team. But it is also because Epstein seems to be the perfect example of a certain kind of elite impunity, those with power getting away with things, and that has been one of the defining features of our era and an engine of discontent and anti-establishment anger that continues to roil our politics to this day. Or, as Michelle Goldberg put it in her latest column, quote, "If it were fiction, it would be both too sordid and too on the nose to be believable, like a season of True Detective penned by a doctrinaire Marxist." Joining me now is Michelle Goldberg, columnist of the New York Times, along with Jesse Eisinger. He's a senior reporter and editor of ProPublica, who wrote an entire book on how the titans of finance escaped criminal charges in the aftermath of the financial crisis. It really does read like a almost over-the-top morality
play. Right, and it just keeps getting more and more so, right? When you read about this private island that he had, never mind the bizarre temple that it seems like he built on this island, but the fact that it was sort of known locally as Pedophile Island, and yet, as far as we know, it was never searched. And you know, the thing about Jeffrey Epstein is that this was out in the open before his arrest, right? Donald Trump was famously quoted saying, you know, he likes beautiful women as much as I do, many of them on the younger side. It was, you know, kind of a wink, wink, nudge, nudge thing. And then he goes to jail and he comes out and he's not shunned, right? He's shunned by some people, but he's still having dinner parties. He's still walking around Manhattan as if, you know, as if this was just like a kind of a traffic skirmish or something. And so, yeah, I mean, I think, you know, one of the grim and horrific lessons of our politics in recent years is that you can buy your way out of the most disgusting of crimes.
And one of the lessons that comes to me watching Acosta today, Jesse, I thought of you in your book, is I don't think Acosta thinks in his heart he made a corrupt deal to a powerful person. No. In the same way that I think there's a lot of editors out there in the world who said no to investigative stories on very powerful men in the Me Too movement who don't think they made a corrupt deal. And there are prosecutors who didn't prosecute folks at the major banks who don't think they made a corrupt deal. They all think on the merits, this was the right call. We didn't have enough. Right. But the didn't have enough is in the context of extremely powerful legal teams breathing down your neck.
Right. Well, there's an institutional problem that they don't investigate these cases properly. They don't prosecute the cases properly. They're incompetent. So we've lost the will and ability to prosecute top corporate executives. So, but then it goes on and over and expands. So we're not prosecuting tax crimes. We're not prosecuting high-end real estate. We're not prosecuting corporate lobbying. We're not.
I mean, Paul Manafort's the best example. Right. It's just like hanging out there, just criming it up everywhere he goes. and nothing until he just falls into, he happens to stumble backwards into the Mueller probe.
And Epstein also is sitting there with this, you know, I'm so sad that I have been focused more on the potential for white-collar crime here than the sex scandal. Right. But nothing about his business or career makes any sense at all. And so he's
apparently a billionaire. He's managing billionaires, but we've only ever heard of one client. Like, the whole thing doesn't add up.
Right. And his mentor was a famous Ponzi schemer who is now in prison. You know, and
I forgot that detail. Right. Yes.
And the other thing that I think is important is that Acosta, this isn't the first time that Acosta has had to account for his behavior in this case. He wrote a letter to the Daily Beast in 2011 when they were investigating part of this. And so a lot of it tracked with what he said today, but not all of it, because at that time, he was making a much bigger deal about what they were up against in terms of the power of Epstein's attorneys. You know, that's probably a less convincing argument to make for politically. Like, how could we stand up to Alan Dershowitz and these two other lawyers? They, you know, it was this assault and we couldn't withstand it, right? I mean, it's a pathetic excuse. That's kind of the best case scenario. That's the least corrupt version of what happened here, is that they folded in the face of all of the money that he had to spend on his defense.
I also think about Cy Vance, and in Manhattan District Attorney, who now has quite a record in which there was evidence of criminal wrongdoing by the Trump children in misrepresenting, in violation of criminal statute and law, the vacancy rates of the condo they're trying to sell. Right. Just didn't press charges. Vance also got money from the Trumps. Harvey Weinstein, with the tape, the infamous tape. Cy Vance doesn't press charges. And then in this case, they asked to downgrade what level of sexual offender he was, that the judge was like, what the heck are you doing? It makes you wonder.
And incompetence in DSK. The list goes on. And then there was a Columbia University OBGYN, 19 accusers in the sexual assault. Vance's office didn't give him any jail time at all, any prison time at all. There's incompetence. There's potential corruption here. Acosta possibly, Vance possibly, campaign finance, donations. Mark Kasowitz, the Trump lawyer, gave a donation to Vance, and Vance then overruled his prosecutorial team who wanted to bring charges against Donnie Trump Jr. and Ivanka. You run that. And if his children had been charged with felony fraud, does he become president? It's very hard to imagine.
I also am seeing this, there also is this sort of blooming conspiracy theory around Epstein because it is so macabre. Right. There's this idea that's it's like a kind of Pizzagate scenario where people are like, there's this enormous pedophile ring that involves every famous person and it's all going to be revealed.
And then it is, right?
But I don't know. I guess my feeling is that because it fits so perfectly, so many of the sort of aspects of our era and elite impunity, I feel like people also are maybe getting a little ahead of where the facts are.
No, I think that's probably true. I mean, I think that the conspiracy theorists maybe intuit correctly this culture of elite impunity, corruption, depravity, etc. In the case of Pizzagate, they have this insane conspiracy theory that the president of the United States is actually a hero in all of this, as opposed to a participant, right? I mean, that's the central myth at the heart of Pizzagate. But you're right that this does feed into all of our kind of cultural tropes about what corruption,
they're doing behind closed doors.
Yeah, and then when it turns out that at least part of that is true, it's very difficult to tell where wild conspiracy theorizing ends and where things really are just worse than we had imagined.
Michelle Goldberg and Jesse Eisinger, thank you both for joining us. Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.